And okay, we're recording. So Yahweh, we just thank you very much. We thank you so much for this time together to spend with Becca Biderman, talking about your calendar and your plan and your son and the and Father, I just thank you so much for what you've had her learning and the opportunity to share. And thank you for the opportunity to come together and share knowledge about your son and his plan of salvation and how the calendar fits into all that. Now, Father, we just ask that you please send your spirit to be here with us and between us and in us, and that whatever is said, Father, that it might be edifying and it might serve you and your Son and to help establish his kingdom here on earth. Father, we thank you for all these things. We ask in the name of your Son, Yeshua, our Messiah and King. Amen. So we are here. Hello, Shalom. My name is Norman
Hi.
Willis, and I'm the apostle for Nazarene Israel. And this is Becca Biderman, and
Bitterman.
she and Biderman, excuse me,
Bitterman. Mhm.
Biderman. Okay, Becca Biderman, and or Rivka Biderman. And so she and her husband, correct me if this is wrong. So she and her husband Ken are in the Galilee region,
Mhm.
and they've been there for 6 years.
Mhm.
And or maybe you want to tell us a little bit about what your so they have a guest house, but
Mhm.
they have been trying real hard to. Or one thing that Yahweh has laid on Becca's heart is to learn about the calendar, to learn about the barley, to and how the whole calendar fits together, and how that talks about the plan of salvation and the plan of restoration, the
Mhm.
good news. And so she has been, at least my understanding is that she has been very intensively involved in, and should I put this on speaker view or gallery view, or does it matter? Probably
For me, it
gallery
doesn't
is fine.
matter.
Yeah, there's just two of us, so gallery is fine. So, but she has been very actively studying the barley and the wheat and all the plants and everything native to the land of Israel. And she's doing it from the standpoint of a messianic believer. So,
Mhm.
I know that a lot of us, we're aware that whether we've come out of the church or whether we've come out of the synagogue or come out of the world in whatever other manner, we are wanting to do what the Torah says to do. And so this is something, what Becca is doing is something I have always wanted to do, is just to have the time to actually live in the land and to experience the calendar and to experience the way all these things play out. But she's been doing this for the last 6 years. So she offered that we could take some time to sit down. I've got all these studies, and so we're trying to put everything together and come up with one study. And just every time I've talked with Becca, I've learned something really, really good. So right now we've got two big barley studies, and her the things I've learned from her feature in both of those. And then I was starting to write a third study, and Becca said, "Okay, wait." We thought this is no, we need to. So Becca offered that we could sit down, and she would help bring me up to speed, her knowledge of what she knows about the calendar. And then I thought, well, that sounds really good. Let's do that, and then we can talk about whatever I need to know, whatever I need to learn, and then we can rewrite the study. We can make one big study that has everything, but then everything is all there in one place, and then there's no more changes and this kind of a thing. Because I think people are really, I think for those of us who know about the barley and those of us who want to do the same calendar that Yahweh commands and the same calendar that Yeshua kept in the first century. It gets just very confusing. And there's all these different calendars and all these different thoughts about the calendars and all these different things. And I just think I mean, I would want, and this is the reason for my studies, is because I want to know what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to know what I'm supposed to believe, how I'm supposed to be practicing. So I just want to take advantage, if that's the right words, but Becca offered to help bring me up to speed. And I thought, wow, that sounds great. And then I had other people say, well, if you're going to talk to Becca, let's record it and then publish it so we can learn too. So I thought, well, this is great. So we talked about a bunch of stuff already. I think we've been talking for a couple of hours. I'm not really sure, or I have no idea. We've been talking for a while. And then we finally got to the point. It's like, well, let's just start the recording and then let's talk. I don't know where we're going to begin, but we got two big studies on the barley. I've got notes on a third study that's sort of a refutation of someone else's popular study that I think everyone who's involved in the barley calendar, we see that there's problems with this other group. There's this other very, very popular group. They have some very charismatic people, and they have a reputation as having published the original calendar. Or they claim that they're still practicing the original calendar as practiced in the days of Moses or Moshe. And those of us who are a little more experienced in the calendar are saying, wait a minute, how can that be? Because there's this problem and that problem, some other problem, and there's a whole list of problems with this other calendar. So this has really set us back in recent years, and we want to establish, okay, wait a minute, if that's close but not it, then what is it? How do we, what do we do here? And Becca, we don't agree on everything, but Becca has got. I think we do agree on the need to get the calendar right, and Becca has some other ideas about 7 species that I need time to study them out. So we can talk about that at whatever point in time, but I just thought it'd be good to take this time and record it, and hopefully Elohim will lead it, and His Spirit will lead it, and then everyone can see what we're talking about. So where would you like to begin? Do you want to just tell us?
Well, yeah, I think it might interest you a little bit about before even the barley had crossed my mind. The first year I was here, there was just such a draw to the land, and I used to tell my husband, somebody needs to live the Torah on this land, because we're told that the Word of God is effective from Genesis to Revelation. It's never lost its strength. It's never lost its purpose. And so my beginning of stirring in my heart for the direction I've been brought is that a connection to the earth was just needed to better understand the words of the Torah. I wasn't even thinking about the barley then. That hadn't even been a thought in my mind, but that was the beginning of it. So you should know, and I don't even know if we have talked about this, everything that I do, when I do it on the land, I do it because I want to understand the Torah, including, as we talked about earlier, when I plant the wheat, I could do it a very easier way, but I choose to do it the primitive way, because
Right.
if I can do it with a hoe, anybody can do it. It could have been done at any time. So when I go through a process, whether it's the barley and trying to prayerfully decide what is it that I'm being shown, and what is it that I need to learn. It's not it. I mean, it's like it's an all-encompassing thing, from looking at the sickle. How does the sickle work in the barley? How are we feeding Yossi and his kids? All of these things play into my thought process, in addition to what the scripture says.
Does everyone know about Yossi? Is that a common joke that I never heard before, or is that just something that we
No,
came up with
it
on
all
that?
started with our Zoom, but Yossi has become
Yeah.
very famous.
Okay. I looked up his name. He's actually the head of the Mossad, I think. Yossi Cohen. So if you were on that Zoom call, so we had this discussion, is because back in ancient times, it's, when you lived on the land and you didn't have all this grain storage and food storage and all this kind of stuff, I mean, you lived and died by the land and the weather that Elohim sent. And so we had this, I think Becca started talking about Yossi Cohen, and, if he has 12 kids or 12 children or whatever, it's like every grain counts. And so we started talking about Yossi and how he's going to make sure that he knows how to eat and this kind of a thing. So anyway, that's where Yossi Cohen comes from.
That's where he comes from. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is all my thought process. And all I can say is you hit the nail on the head. I am just very blessed that my husband gives me the liberty to do everything that God calls me, speaks in my heart. to chase the barley, to plant the barley, to test the barley throughout the year. I'm not just in the barley and I'm finished for the year. I'm literally on the earth in Israel 12 months out of the year, looking at vegetation, looking at what comes and goes, looking at you know, the what is it? Peter talks about that men are as the grass, and his glory is as the flowers thereof. He's here today and it's gone tomorrow. And one of the Psalms, it talks about that reference Peter's using, and it says, and the hot breath of God blows on him, and you can't even see where he's standing. I watch that drama on this land every year. I watch those hot winds blow on that barley until they're shriveled up and they're gone. And then the wind finally blows them and they're broken off, and you can't even tell where they once stood. So for me, even on the property here, God impressed me to plant according to his seasons. And when the barley shows up, I start planting. So for me, the Torah and the barley and the wheat is all encompassing in my life. It literally drives the daily function of our life, not to the point of Abraham. I'm not in a tent in the middle of a pasture, but
Yeah.
but short of that, my garden, my work, barley comes first. My husband, bless his heart, he doesn't say anything when the house is in a shambles and I'm out in the barley field, and it really is my life, and I'm very blessed.
Amen. Amen. We should probably just cover this because so one of the things, and we can talk about this, but so if I understand this correctly, so Becca has an idea that there's 7 species or perhaps 8 that are important. And
7.
I'm
Deuteronomy
sorry,
8:8.
Deuteronomy
Deuteronomy 8:8.
8:8,
7.
Deuteronomy 8:8. Okay, and so 7, and then there's another camp or another group of thought that is like, okay, we're just going to focus on the barley, and so and there's pros and cons to be made for both arguments. I believe that a lot of people who've come out of the church or out of other forms of worship, it seems real important to us. We know that Elohim says not to add anything to his word and not to take anything away. And then Revelation says that there's curses if we do that, and this kind of a thing. So there's a lot of people who are very, very keen just to focus on, okay, what exactly does Scripture say? But it's and let's be careful not to add anything to that. So anytime, like I say, a Talmud reference is mentioned or a tradition is mentioned, there's a lot of people who get very edgy or cautious around that. But then at the same time, there's also a lot to be said, at least for knowing what these other references are, because a lot of these other references were written back in the days when people did live this kind of lifestyle. So there's some concern. We have to be very careful that the things that were written don't add or at the very least don't contradict what is written in Scripture. So there's a lot of very careful scholarship and parsing that goes on at that level. But Becca has some other references that she digs in the ancient references, and so she's trying to identify what is correct and what is not correct. And she also tries to match everything up to the parables and to the witness that Yeshua gave. So I think these are, I think the average person just wants to know, okay, when is Passover? I think that's what the average person just wants to know. But there are others of us who are like, we're very involved in this, and we really want to know. We want to be sure that this is exactly what we're supposed to do, and nothing apart from that. So I don't know if this conversation, we might get into some of that. We've been talking about that the last hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it's been. But I think there's a lot of concern. And one of the things that I appreciate about you, Becca, is that I do get the sense definitely that you are trying very hard to, you want to do the calendar that Elohim wants, because we're not here to please ourselves, we're here to please him. So yeah, and I do get that sense from you. So that's
Yeah, yeah. It'd be much easier not to say what I do. Quite frankly, it'd be much easier just to do it and not talk about it.
yeah,
It
yeah.
wouldn't change what I do, but it'd be
Well,
much easier, you know.
sadly, Becca has been attacked a lot by
And that's okay. That's not the
brethren, and
subject of this. Yeah,
yeah,
that's okay.
yeah.
That's okay. But truly, that is. I mean, what I do when I tell things that I do, I never tell anybody what they should believe, when they should worship, what days they are. Never, 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 never. I always tell them this is what I do and why I do it. This is what I'm going to do, and this is why I'm going to do it. So that's how I leave my witness. I go through everything I go through so that me and my husband
Mhm.
know which day we're going to keep the Sabbaths of the feasts on. It's very important to us that we have that timing exactly right. And because I'm here and it's become such a passion, as I've already said, I live, breathe, eat, and sleep literally in the mornings. There's many times my first waking moments, I'm thinking about the barley or the wheat or the literally, very literally. So since it's my passion, it's my joy to share what I've been allowed is the right word, to experience, to touch, to see. It's my joy to be able to do that. But it comes from my heart to know for our household what we should be doing.
I think so. This will be probably interesting for a lot of people also, just the differences. So you brought up the, I mean, it's obvious that we share a great many things in common, and then but we have also some differences of understanding. So I think right now we're talking about the differences of understanding, which is fine. So it's good for people to be aware of these issues. I think this is a lot of people in the Messianic movement. They take responsibility for things at a personal level or a family level, and they say, okay, well, it's a very personal walk. I have a very personal relationship with our Messiah, and so I just want to make sure that I have my walk uh, correct and in line before Him. And we would certainly agree with that. There's also, though, a different line of thought and a different line of reasoning, where it was, for example, in Parashah Nitzavim, it's that the nation of Israel was called into service as a nation, as an ordered nation. So once the nation of Israel was ordered and everything was in its place, that's when they use the y'all form. That's when Yahweh said, "I call y'all today
Right,
into service as a nation."
right,
And
right.
I think today we read you in the English or
And we
whatever
skip
language.
all.
We skip all. We don't realize
Yeah,
this. No, He's called us all into service as an ordered nation. And so
right.
there's a small but growing section of the movement that says, oh, wait a minute, how is it in the book of Acts? No, we're
Right.
supposed to have
That's right.
order. We're supposed to have structure and this kind of a thing. So we're attempting to, in addition to having our own walks correct, we're also hoping to do a pioneering work, I guess, of reestablishing what was that structure supposed to be and how do we reestablish that structure. And then, so for us, it's very important to learn from the people who are experts in their respective fields. Like, um, I learn good stuff from you every time we talk.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And you and I are actually in agreement on that because we were talking earlier about how does the body unify?
mhm, mhm, mhm,
It's basically the same subject.
mhm.
Just like you said, it's a
Right.
nation, it's a national thing. But you also we're changing as we mature, and I think
Mhm.
that there has been some adjustments. But you also have to understand that maybe even 15 years ago, listening to a woman talk about the barley wouldn't be so acceptable.
Well, I don't know why. See, to me, um,
I know. I understand that you would be okay, but there's still many parts of the body that would not be okay with that,
Mm.
even 15 years ago, because it would be as if I was presuming to teach. You see what I'm saying? And there's that whole, so I bringing it back to me saying, this is what my household does.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a woman, and this goes back to some of those groups have to say the name this way, and there are some strange regulations that can exist, and we're still the body of Christ, but there's some strange regulations that can exist. I try to tread lightly. I try to present my platform of what we're doing in a very sincere, heartfelt, well-researched manner, and say, to the best of my ability and from what I have studied, my house is doing this because I understand that the scripture says this. And I wish it was that easy that everybody got on board, but it's a growth process. And we're hoping that people will get on board.
Should we talk about this? Because there's two different
What?
levels. There's two different levels for me. Okay, so
Okay.
at the one level, so I think so back in ancient times, so we had the Levitical priesthood back in those
Yes.
days, and now
Yes.
we're not in the Levitical order, we're in the Melchizedekian order.
Right.
So under the Levitical priesthood, I don't see any restriction. I mean, so what would happen is that people would observe. My understanding, you may know differently, but my understanding is that the people would observe the barley and the new moons and all these things in their respective locations throughout the land, and then there would be witnesses to that would be verified by the priesthood. And I think you've mentioned we don't know the exact mechanism, whether that was
Right.
done in cities or whether it was all done up at Jerusalem. We don't know that. But yeah, I don't see any restriction at all for man, woman, just as far as a witness. I think the witnesses were known, and I think they were qualified, and people would know. And then they had in the Talmud, they had certain questions that are recorded verifying the witness of the new moon,
Mm-hmm.
so that they would get to know, is this person knowledgeable? Is this person legitimate? And then they would actually test the witnesses so that they
So,
would know, is this a true witness or a false witness? Because
mm-hmm.
it's important. You don't want to declare the calendar on the wrong day, because like what you were saying, it's the calendar is one of the main things that either unifies or divides the body, because it's,
Mm-hmm.
and then that old rabbinic saying that whoever's calendar you keep, that's who you worship. So we don't,
That's right.
yeah. So and then as far, I think where people would have the issue is, uh, well, there'd be a few different camps, and then one of the questions would be, like, as far when you make the statement of, that you're declaring for your household. So then some people would say that's fine. Other people would say, why isn't her husband declaring for her household? And then you would also have another camp that would say, okay, are we declaring as individual households, or are we supposed to be declaring as an ordered nation, or how is
Mm-hmm.
that supposed to go?
Right. No, I understand all of that. And that's exactly why I said I tread lightly, is because, yeah, there are those questions where's my husband? My husband is in bed. He's basically, he's disabled. I'll just leave it
Mm,
that way. And he spends quite a bit of time in bed. So he's not
mm,
able to go out and look.
mhm,
Um, isn't really even able to go out and enjoy the garden in our yard with me.
mm,
So there's that. And then also, I think that there's still that feeling of taboo, because I'm using the Word of God to help me make my determination. Um, yeah, and that's still not well received, that um, women can can and should do that right determination of the Word of God, because I mean, let's just look coming out of Torah and what was the man. The women weren't involved in that, and that's fine. And I didn't mean to open this whole can of worms, just to say that I do tread very lightly, and as you know, I've said when I answer your questions, it's what I believe until this point,
Mhm.
because every year I learn more.
Mhm.
So treading lightly is a really good thing.
Mhm.
It's kind of like that. I always laugh. People say, "Oh, you should write a book," and I say, "I don't want to write a book, because once you put it down in writing, it's like it's in stone. I'm still learning. I want to be able to come back to you and say, like the red barley this year. When I first saw the red barley, I thought, oh, it's a strain. It's an early strain of red barley. That's what I was told it was. And then last year I saw red barley where there had never been red barley before. And I thought, oh, it's not an early strain. If the barley comes out of the earth early, it turns red. And
Mhm.
so last year I brought the red barley home from Raim and I planted it, and the barley came up red.
Mhm.
So, this, you have to, we don't have years and years and years and years and years
Mhm.
in this stuff on the level that I'm operating at.
Mhm.
And so I do tread lightly, because what I believe today, I really believe it with all my heart, but I'm being taught more every year, and I understand more every year. And I think we have the big chunk of it right. I
Mhm.
think maybe the edges and
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
little things need to be adjusted.
Mhm.
But I don't want, for example, the people I told you that contacted me from Poland. She says, "How do you know that Passover is going to be this date?" And I said, "I don't. I have to see the new moon." So she whips out my post on Facebook and she says, "This." And I said, "Oh, but do you see that word right there? It says circa. It says near this date. That doesn't mean it's going to be that date." So I don't want those types of issues. You see what I'm saying? I want to give the people my best determination.
Mhm.
And if God says, "Wait a minute, I want you to look at this over here, and I'm going to show you something you need to see," I want to be able to come back and say to you, Norm, we talked about this, but you know what I saw? So that's my whole premise for treading lightly.
Well,
All of that.
I appreciate the fact that you tread lightly, and I mean that's what I was bringing up before. Is there's other groups that tread viciously or what have you, and I just think that's completely uncalled for inside of the body. But I think that, so I guess if you're coming from the for those of us who believe that there should be something ordered, I guess kind of what we're hoping to do and what we're hoping that you can help us with is that so if you're going to have a nation, and as we were talking about before, it's so important to have a single calendar, because
Yes,
really, if you have a different calendar, you're meeting on different days. Well, how are you unified?
that's
You're
right.
not even meeting on the same days. It's not that we hold anything against people who worship on the lunar Sabbath. It's just we never meet. Well, not never, but we don't meet on the same days that they do. It's not that we
That's right.
hold anything against the other groups, but it's just it's hard to be unified. It's hard to have teachings and take fellowship and this kind of a thing when you're not. I mean, at the very least, as the basics is on the same calendar.
Right.
So I think one of the things is that we are trying to, and I'm fine with, I mean, so I have done a lot of revisions of my studies. Like, to me, it's not important that I be right. To me, what's important is that we learn what is right and then
Absolutely.
publish what is right, so that other people who want to
Absolutely.
know what is right, they have
Absolutely.
like a written reference standard. So that's kind of what we're going for. And so we learned new things last year. So we completely rewrote our study on Aviv barley and the head of the year. And then I learned more things from you from the meetings this year. So then now we have to rewrite that study. And also there's another study that we want to go from the shift from the thought that soft dough is Aviv, and then learning,
Right.
no, it's not soft dough, it's medium dough. So, okay, so we have to rewrite it. And then I thought, well, as long as we're going to rewrite that study, let's just take all, because we had two big studies and we're starting on a third smaller study. And I thought, let's just talk with you like you were suggesting,
Sure.
and let's get it at least as the best as what we know. Let's get everything down. Let's figure out what it is supposed to be, and then, whether anybody else wants to follow it but us or not, but at least we will have for ourselves, we will have something that is a definitive, or what we consider a
Absolutely.
definitive study, at least until it changes the next time. And I have no problem doing that. I've done some things I've issued. It's like, version 4. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's but to me, it's very helpful, because then I can show people at least this is what I believe at this particular point today, subject to further, when Yahweh gives more light, I'm subject to more revelation. But at least we have something that when people ask questions, okay, well, what about the calendar? What is the calendar? We have a study, we have a book that we can send them or hand them, or what have you. So, but I was just excited because to us, it's very important to have the details right. And it's, to me, it's, when we learn, it's like, wow, there's somebody that knows more about this stuff than we do. Let's find out, so we can incorporate that knowledge in the study. And it's hard because we were doing a study on the ancient Hebrew wedding ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
and we realized, what a super theme that is, because at a certain level, you take a look at Scripture, and Scripture is all about the wedding, and it's all about our Father is seeking a bride for His Son. And then when you take a look at that, it's, and we were taking a look at it. We put that on hold because of another step. We put that on hold because of the feasts, and then we were hoping to get back to that after the feasts. But it's kind of like, well, the wedding, I mean, you could just expand the calendar right into that, because the calendar and the wedding, those two things are very parallel.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
so calendar is one of those topics you could kind of go forever on it.
Mhm.
The calendar and the
Absolutely.
wedding, and those two are really the same thing in a
They really
certain
are.
sense.
They're covenant.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I'm not sure where that took us or where that leaves us. So we one of the things, what would help me a lot. So I know you've been really super busy and you've had a lot of things going on, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I think one of the things that we hope to do is we want to update, and I know you haven't had time to read it, but we want to we want to take our 2.5 studies, so to speak, and rewrite them as one big study that is, uh, my thought is, and I know we could expand it and we could make a whole book out of the barley, and the wheat. But my thought was, okay, well, as long as we are learning from you that soft dough is not acceptable, it's medium dough is acceptable, because it's you can parch it and grind it into flour. Well, okay, not only can you parch it, but you can also grind it and turn it into flour, which is required by Leviticus 2 and verse 15. But
Yes.
it's also viable as seed, which
Yeah.
gets into Yeshua's parables, that unless a grain of seed falls to the ground and dies, if a grain of seed falls, I'm paraphrasing, but unless a grain of seed falls to the ground and dies, it produces no fruit. But if it falls to the earth and dies, it produces much fruit. And so that
Right.
made total sense to me. What you were saying is, okay, yeah, that there really is there, at least there seems to be a strong correspondence there, that the barley should be viable as seed. Again, you could get into these big arguments or discussions. Does the wave sheaf have to be viable as seed or not have to be viable as seed? But it does make sense that the wave sheaf should have to be viable as seed, because the wave sheaf represents Yeshua, and Yeshua, in a sense, fell to the ground and died. and then now he's producing much fruit.
And
So
he
his
rose, what
spirit is
happened?
reproducing. Sorry, go ahead.
When I say, so to complete that parable, when he rose, what happened?
He
He
produced
produced
much
much fruit.
fruit.
The saints
Amen.
rose when he rose.
Reproduction.
That's
In
right.
it.
It's a beautiful story. The agriculture is just the most beautiful love story and redemption story I've ever seen played out in front of my eyes in my life. It's all there. It's all there. We just have to, we've been divorced from it for so long. Just think about this. I mean, it's something that I'm required to grow in every year. And every year I think, oh my gosh, I've learned so much. But he can't give it to us all at once. We can't contain it if he does. It's like you're right. The calendar is the love story, and the wedding feast, and the wedding feast is the love story, because that's exactly what the omer is. We were just talking about when he died as the seed, and he rose. He brought forth fruit. The saints rose when he rose.
Amen. Would it be would it work to go through the study briefly, and we could just sort of paraphrase? I could talk to you about it, and you could tell me if there's anything wrong with our
If you want,
conclusions.
you've got me for the hour and a half or whatever you need me.
Okay. Well, great. So wonderful. So I'll share screen then. Okay. So for those who are new to the whole thing, so Aviv, Barley, and the head of the year. So, uh, well, we could paraphrase the whole thing, I suppose. So, anyway, so the calendar begins with on a new moon day when the first crescent sliver of the new moon is sighted. That's called Rosh Chodesh. But then there's a special Rosh Chodesh every year, and that's Rosh Hashanah, or the head of the year. And so there's a big question. Oh, and this would be good because we can talk about the qualifications. This should tie in. So every year there's a big question. What exactly, when exactly do you begin Rosh Hashanah? When exactly does it start? So, and that gets into this whole definition of Aviv barley and why is there Aviv? I think we should start on the other. I don't know why. I just get this sense we should start on this one here. I started to rewrite it, but I think this will be more direct in this kind of a thing. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there's a certain doctrine by a very popular group that they don't want to declare Rosh Hashanah. They don't want to declare the month of the Aviv until you have a large part of the barley harvest ready to go. So they have this doctrine that you need what they call harvestable fields before you can declare the new year, before you can declare Rosh Hashanah. Um, and then we have questions on that because when we do the math on that, it just seems like it doesn't work. So, and then whether or not this other group ever agrees or not, that's a totally different subject. But so I think a lot of people, whether you believe in 7 species or whether you're focused just on the barley, I think, well, like you said, if the barley is correct, all the rest of the 7 species are going to fall into place, and then everything is going to work out. So I
The
think,
barley is vitally important. Vitally important. If we don't get it right, nothing else is right.
I'm in. Yeah, we're totally on the same page on that. So I think one of the reasons, and then our understanding is that the timing of the barley, like someone said on the Zoom meeting, he said, what the reason we're focusing on the barley is because there has to be an omer or a wave sheaf of barley ready to present on the day of the wave sheaf offering, and that's 15 to 21 days after Rosh Hashanah. So it's kind of like backwards thinking, but you're out there inspecting the barley and you're kind of some people are asking themselves, okay, is this barley going to be ready to present at this much discussed state of Aviv which we now believe is medium dough barley. But is there going to be enough barley to present an omer or a sheaf 15 to 21 days after the new moon? And then, so what people see there is that, okay, so let's suppose you have a new moon, and correct me if any of this is wrong, please. So let's say you have a new moon sighting on the first day of the week.
Yes.
And then actually it would be sighted, I believe that would be, you would sight it, yeah, on the, as Sabbath is ending. So then the day of the new moon sighting would be here. So the first day of the month. So the new moon is sighted at the close of Sabbath. So the first day of the month would be here. And then you'd have the Passover on the 14th day. And then the day following the wave sheaf. Yeah, this will work. This will be good. So you could just tell me, I'll tell you my understanding, and then you just tell me anything that seems wrong to you.
Okay.
Okay, very good. That'll work. Okay, so what we're saying is, okay, so if I'm, because what we're really going for here, Becca, what we really want is, it would be great if there were a number of people who understood, how are we supposed to inspect the barley? How do we know that the barley is right, and why? How do we know? I had one brother, he wrote to me and he's just like, could you please, when you talk with Becca, could you, he wants me, I appreciate him very much. He wants us to make a whole video together about, how the barley works and how everything comes together. And I understand his sentiments. He's looking for a training video so that he can understand the process, because he wants to declare, he wants to know for him and his household, he wants to know, why is it this way? Why is it this time of year? Why is the barley, what is so necessary? So what I'm saying is, okay, so the thing about the barley is, we know that 15 to 21 days after we start the head of the year. So there's going to be this new moon, and that's going to be the special new moon that we call Rosh Hashanah, or the head of the year. And we're going to cite it. We're going to say, okay, this is not just Rosh Hadesh. This is not just the new moon day. This is Rosh Hashanah. This is the
Right.
day of the new year. And
Right.
he said, well, how do we know? And I'm going to tell him, I'm going to say, okay, the reason we know is because we at least ideally, at least in ancient times, we would have people who know the barley well. They've been raising barley their whole life, or whatever. They're intimately familiar with the calendar and the weather and the land of Israel and everything else that goes on. And we have at least 2 or 3 witnesses who are going to agree, or 2 or 3 witness teams, or what have you, and they're all going to agree. Okay, this barley right here, this barley is going to be ready to go, and then whether it's 15 to 21 days from now. And the reason, so it's 15 to 21 days because if the new moon is sighted at the close of Sabbath, that means the first day, the new moon day. Can you see my mouse?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So then that means the Passover will be 14 days later. And we know that the wave sheaf offering is always the first day of the week on the week that follows the Passover week.
Yes.
So, for example, let's say the new moon was sighted here at the close of the first day of the week, or the close of Sunday night. Then you'd end up with the new moon day being falling on the second day of the week, and then it'd be the Passover would be here on the 14th day, but still, so anywhere during this week that the Passover falls, it doesn't matter any day of the week that the Passover falls, still you have the wave sheaf offering is offered the next day. So in this particular instances, there would be 21 days until the omer.
I agree. Yes.
So whether it's 15 days, 2 weeks and a day, or 21 days, which is 3 weeks. So that's what we have to know. We have to have experienced barley observer teams that are hopefully all on the same page, and that they know that, okay, so we're ready to go. Okay, good. So, and then another question is, sometimes people think, well, do we need harvestable field? Do we need to bring in a lot of barley? Or do we just need, as a minimum, or it can be a lot of barley, but as a minimum, we only need one? And our understanding is that there was a circumstance in Joshua 5. I wonder if I could pull it up here real quick. So there was a circumstance in Joshua 5 where I can't remember what verse it was. Yes, there it is. Okay. So now the children of Joshua 5, starting in verse 10. Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day at twilight on the plains of Jericho.
Yes.
And they ate the produce of the land, meaning they ate barley of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day.
Mm-hmm.
So what that says to us is that in Joshua 5, you had this scenario because they ate they had the Passover, and then the very first day they ate of the produce of the ground, and we're not allowed to do that until we have brought the wave sheaf offering.
We're in agreement. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, good. All right, good. So we'll verify. Okay, and here you can see where here's the limit of my revision on this page here. So I guess I was revising this one also. And then we had this other discussion. This was very interesting. So there's a question as to when does the barley have to be Aviv? So some groups, I'm not sure whether they still do it today, but I think some of the groups have said, okay, now the barley has to be Aviv on the day the new moon is sighted, or the day before the new moon is sighted, or they won't even declare the new moon of the Aviv.
Right.
And we say, okay, that doesn't make sense to us because the barley has to be Aviv here on the day of the wave sheaf offering. So we don't understand the reason why. Why are some of the groups saying you've got to have barley that's Aviv when the new moon is sighted, when it doesn't need to be Aviv until 15 to 21 days later? But then there's an interesting wrinkle, and we found some interesting Talmud references to this. I could probably pull that up fairly quickly. So there were times historically. So let me see if I could. I wonder if I could pull that up quickly. Let me give it a try.
That the one you sent me? That would be in the email you sent me, if that makes it very
Yes.
easy.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Yeah, good idea. So let's do that. So let's go to sent items, and then Becca. Oop, probably Rebecca. And why doesn't it? It doesn't want to search. It's supposed to want to search. Here it is.
There you go.
Where are we? Okay. We got it. Nope. Nope.
Not so easy. I'm sorry.
No, it's a good idea. It was a really good idea. Okay, well let's see if we can find it again. So in any event, okay, so here's Sea of Galilee. Here's Jerusalem, where we need to bring. And then here is, okay, and then there's a Talmud reference. What they were saying is that in ancient times, we could probably find that really quickly here. So Bible, Mishnah, Menachot 10. So we don't follow the Mishnah in any sense, but we find it a very interesting historical reference. And then, so what it says here in the Mishnah, Menachot 10, is it says that the mitzvah or the commandment of the omer, according to the Mishnah, according to the Talmud, is to bring the barley reaped for the meal offering from fields proximate to Jerusalem. So in other words, what this says to me is that in ancient times, back when the Mishnah was written or edited, heavily edited, circa 220 CE, it was the rabbinic custom or practice that when they could bring an omer of barley from near Jerusalem, why would you go farther, right? So if the barley is ready right across right across the valley, you would just go get the barley right there.
Right.
But if the barley did not ripen in the fields proximate or close to Jerusalem, then one brings it from any place in the land of Israel. And then they say there was an incident where the omer came from Gagot Seraphin, and the wheat for the 2 loaves on Shavuot came from the valley of Ein Socher. So I just Googled that and looked that up. So then we had Seraphin, and that's close to Tel Aviv. So then we just take directions on Google Maps, and we start with a starting point of Jerusalem. And it tells us that it takes, depending on the route, now with modern shoes and modern trails or whatever they have, now it's going to take you about 12 hours, give or take, to go from Seraphin to Jerusalem. So depending, it's probably a little bit more than a day's walk. So you're basically realistically talking 2 days.
Sure.
And then there was the other reference. So the valley of Ein Socher. So then let's start a second map here. So Ein Socher. So I did a search for that, and it pulled up Ein Akev. And so then I did, okay, so let's go Ein Akev, directions to Jerusalem. And so that's further south. That's in the Negev area. And so so basically you're looking at, depending on the route, depending how you're going to go with modern transportation, modern shoes, modern trails, you're looking at a minimum of a 30-hour walk. So you're talking 3 good, maybe 4 days travel. So I had heard, and I think you said that you had heard something similar. I had heard in the past that they could cut the sheaf up to 3 days prior to the offering. And so it makes sense. So to me, what they're really saying here is, if the barley's ready in Jerusalem, we're going to take it from Jerusalem. So many years, that's going to be the case. But in some of these extreme years, it's not going to be ready in Jerusalem because, like what you're saying, in a normal year, given what we know, the strawberries in Florida are going to be ripe before the strawberries up in Michigan. So it's the same normally, maybe not, same print, not maybe not every year, but in general, you're going to see the barley get ripe sooner the further south you go.
Yes.
And so I think this is also, Jerusalem is at altitude, so it's a little bit warmer down in the lowlands. So this is why I think a lot of the barley teams, they're searching in a normal year, they're searching around Sderot or some other places. And the place we looked at before, where the Talmud mentions, is in the area of Tel Aviv, which also again is down lower.
Yes.
So that's an interesting question, because that's an interesting wrinkle, because now they're saying, or at least, and I can't find the reference to where that came from, but they were saying that you could at least historically cut up to 3 days prior. You could cut the omer, which makes sense. So let's say the barley was found Aviv here or somewhere in the south. It's going to take you 3 days to get it to Jerusalem. Of course, you're going to cut it 3 days before. You're not going to dig out the dirt patch and carry the whole thing on your cart. You're going to cut it and bring it up.
Right.
So,
and of consideration, I mean, we're talking about the timing of everything, which, you're going to want to cut something like that. If you're traveling 3 days, you're going to want to cut it on the front side of medium dough. Do you remember the Zoom we did here? Yeah. Do you remember the Zoom we did here where we looked at the barley grains and I followed up and how hard they were?
They got
And
very
it's,
hard. Yeah, within a couple of days, 2, 3 days, they were much
yeah, and,
harder.
and it's still not, it was like just in the 60s to 70s at that period of time. Normally, we have a very unusual year. Normally, it is going to be already the hot, dry winds are blowing. And my goodness, that changes the barley so quickly. So yes, you're going to absolutely, in that condition, cut it in an earlier, just a little bit earlier
Okay, so
stage.
just ahead of medium dough.
Yeah, because why? Let's just put it on the. Okay, yeah,
Because it's
just
parchable, it's grindable
because.
into flour, it's
Yeah,
viable, and
right.
also it's still going to be wet, but over 3 days it's going to dry out.
And this is assuming we're carrying a bundle of barley. This is
Mm-hmm.
assuming we've not threshed the barley.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to assume that we're carrying a bundle of barley. So
I did read that now historically, I don't know, there's no, I don't know any Torah commandment for this, but just to chime in, I did read historically that they did present an uncut or a cut but unthreshed sheaf, and
yes,
I could
I
find
would
that.
assume that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because remember I live here and I know how they are. I know that they'd want to see, is there any mildew in the stalks? And they're looking for this and they're looking for that, is it healthy? Yeah, so I mean, I can't see them taking anything other than stalks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they would, okay. Good. So, okay. So they want to know the condition of stalks. That's good information.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not telling you that that's written, but I'm just saying, when I look at a field of barley, you will find disease in the barley field, the wild barley fields. You will find disease.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen barley heads that had, I don't know what it is. It's like a fungus, and the whole thing turns black, and you see that in the fields. So you want to make sure the barley's healthy that you're offering, because again, you're bringing the best
Right.
of your first fruits.
Right. No, it makes sense. I know just our Orthodox brethren, they'll reject a red heifer just because of one hair.
One hair.
One hair that's not, or it might be two hairs or something like that. But it's like not a lot of hairs have to be not red, and they'll reject the whole cow. So
That's right.
they're very, and that's good for a lot of things that they're very, very particular about what they
Thorough.
want, and they want things, very thorough. They will have a
Yeah.
very high standard
Yeah.
for things that they want. Okay, so good. Okay, so that I think that's why I stopped writing right there, was because we were talking about the possibility that the sheaf would be cut up to 3 days prior, and then I thought, okay, wow, we need to have this talk before I keep writing, so we don't have to
Right.
write it all over again.
And we can talk about the things we talked about before. It also fits the pattern of the Messiah. It was 3 days before the wave sheaf
Right,
when he was cut
right,
off from the living.
right. Yep, yep. Amen. Amen. So, okay, so then it gets into, people say, well, why, there's this other group that says that, there's this other group that says that you can, that you need to wait for the fields to be harvestable before you can uh, declare the Aviv. And they say that if any barley should become ready to harvest before that, that the farmers can just harvest that barley and lay it off to one side, just so long as they don't eat of it in any form, that they're allowed to cut it first. And then some people we would say that that's not correct, because what we read in Deuteronomy 16 verses 9 and 10 is, it says, count 7 weeks for yourself. So begin to count the 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. So in other words, what we hear is, when you start cutting, when you
Mm-hmm.
cut that wave sheaf, that's when you start counting the omer. That's when you start counting the 7 weeks. And if you use a sickle, put that on mute. If you use a sickle and you start cutting barley and then lay it off to the side, even though you don't eat of it first, to us, we would think that's a violation of Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9. Is that, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so as you said, I try to match everything that we do also to the New Testament. Matthew 13:38 tells us the field is the world.
13:38. The field is the world. Yes.
Yep. And the verse finishes, the good seeds are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. So my understanding is that if a field represents the world, and we're looking for something that represents the Messiah,
right,
we need the beginning, the Reshit Bikur, from the world or the field.
Right, and that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, because there's also this other group other groups who are saying, I don't know where they get this. I can't find any Torah quotation. So we talked about Yossi Cohen and his field, and so back in ancient times, Yossi would have his field, and he would undoubtedly fence it to keep the livestock out of whatever grains and things he's growing. And then he would also, back in ancient times, they would hunt any wild game that might come in and eat their crops. So you would, truthfully, in ancient times, you probably would have a protected field, or what they might call a pristine field, or what have you. Okay, I mean, that part to me seems legitimate. But what I don't get is, and maybe if you could just comment, you're always respectful and you always say things in a nice way, you tread lightly. But what I don't get is where these other groups come up with this concept of what they call Father's Field, because I remember this was 1 or 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly, but there was barley that was ready, and I can't remember if it was yours or what it was, but there was barley. I think it was yours, and they rejected it because the animals had been in that field. That was your barley, and so
that
they
was
rejected.
Becca's patch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Becca's patch.
That's right. And I was like, why did they reject? Because animals found something good to eat. Animals found grain to eat. Why is that? Because from our perspective, what we're looking for is, we're looking to know, when would the barley be Aviv if Yossi Cohen had hypothetically fenced the field to feed his 12 children.
Right.
So for
let's
us,
just talk about the fact that actually Torah addresses this, and I can't tell you where the verse is, but I specifically have read that about the restitution if your animal grazes somebody else's field. So if they wrote about it, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's the words exactly, but there was absolutely a law that talks about the restitution if your animal grazes someone else's field.
Yes. I know what, okay, I can't find it, but I remember, I give witness to that.
So it actually does exist. It happened.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to let it happen, but I have to tell you.
Animals break fences.
I see it today. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the Bedouin's horses or his cows or his goats over in the domestic wheat field. It happens.
Mm-hmm. So
I don't understand the term the Father's field. I don't know. I know it's a theology.
Yeah.
And I do know the group sees the I don't know. I can't say, but I do know that they're looking for something that hasn't had animals in it at all.
Right.
And was very appalled at the thought of crushing the precious barley. I don't know.
To me, it just seems like adding to his word, because I don't see that anywhere in the Torah, and I don't understand. I just don't understand the thought that the barley has to come. It's like, okay, so what is the purpose of the sheaf? I mean, so I get their thought. I get the thought that the wave sheaf does represent Yeshua, and so we want to offer this, as perfect of a sheaf as we can because it is symbolic of Yeshua. I get that part, but why the rest of the field has to be perfect, that I don't get. So what makes more sense is what your comment is, that the field represents the world. Well, the world is a filthy place. You've got
Yeah.
animals of all kinds,
Messiah
clean
said
and
it did.
unclean. Yep.
Messiah said it represents the world.
There you go.
And if we want to take a look at how filthy it was the year that he laid his life down, we go to Revelation, and they call Jerusalem spiritual
Sodom and
Sodom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I break just about 2 minutes
Sure.
here and help
I'll
my
put it on
husband?
pause. Sure. Absolutely. I'll
Okay.
put it on pause. Okay. I took my Toledo off. It's getting a little warm here. So, yeah, no, it makes total sense. Are there other things that these other groups are doing that we could talk about in a general sense that are like the whole father's field concept? And
Okay, so this same person that you referred to with the father's field, which there's nothing written in the Bible other than there was a new moon offering. They believe that the moon can only be sighted from Jerusalem and count.
the moon can only be sighted from Jerusalem. Why?
Because they have to have that first fruit offering, that new moon offering. And so if it's not sighted from Jerusalem, you've got to journey there to take the information. And so,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah, so it's only allowed, it only counts for them. And I kind of think that for the situation we talked about earlier, that's when that situation started falling apart because historically, we know what they did. Historically, we know there are 7 Levitical mountains and that they would send signal fires, and even in, as far as Babylon, they would come back for the feasts and be here on time. They knew when the new moons were. They relayed that information from Jerusalem. You can read about it in Acts chapter 2. Everybody was there for Shavuot, speaking all these different languages. They'd come up to Jerusalem. How did they know? Well, they sent signal fires and they relayed the information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've read. Yeah, it's right there in the Talmud.
Yep.
I mean, it's a historical reference. It's not a commandment, but still, that's what they did. So
yes.
I don't understand why would you not be able to send signal fires from other places where the moon was sighted?
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, that's the other thing is it's Jerusalem only. And that's, again, why that person is highly valued for his new moon sightings.
Oh.
Because he's right there on the outskirts of Jerusalem.
Okay, it's an interesting doctrine. I've never heard it before. I mean, you could easily argue for it because it's, of course, I mean, if you're right there in Jerusalem, then you sight the moon, you're right there.
Right.
But I don't know why that would be. I mean, a lot of times the moon is sighted is it Tel Aviv first before it's, because the way the Earth rotates and this kind of a thing. I think it's, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that the new moon is visible. Sometimes it's visible closer to Tel Aviv, or at least further west, but I don't understand why a signal fire, I mean, why you wouldn't have the possibility of Levites down in the Tel Aviv area verifying the people's sightings and being able to send a signal fire. I don't.
We know that that's what the Bible says. The Levites lived among the people, and they sat in the city gates. They had storehouses. You could see them all over Israel in these ruins. You go in the city gates, there's a storehouse on either side where the Levites kept the grain to feed the
Hmm.
needy, the orphans, the widows. I don't see why a trusted Levite couldn't get a signal fire back up to Jerusalem.
I would think it would be important because I would think that they would. I mean, I think they would have a system. It's interesting. Are there any? Well, we'll have to look. We'll have to search the. We'll have to do a search on that. Because yeah, obviously it would take a while, even by a horse. You know, it would take hours
Mhm.
to.
And then the question is when was the sacrifice for the new moon presented? Was it done at night or was it done in the day? You know, all of this, all of this is, you know, we can look at all of this, of course, but just by the very fact, when we look at Acts chapter 2, and we see that the signal fires worked, and everybody
Hmm.
came up to Jerusalem on the right day to keep Shavuot together. And
Hmm.
everybody that needed to be there from all of these nations, when the power of the Holy Spirit was given, were all right there on the
Hmm.
appropriate day.
Hmm. No, clearly they did use signal fires at the very least for the first and the seventh months. I don't know why they wouldn't use them. I'll have to do some more research on that. I don't know why they wouldn't. Given the fact that due to the rotation of the Earth, that the new moon is visible in Tel Aviv and that area. I think it's Tel Aviv. I think that's the correct
I think
direction.
it is. I think they see it like 2 or 3 minutes, not much. I think the lag time is like 2 or 3 minutes before us.
Right, but on some in some situations, just due to the rotation, that can be enough.
Right.
I would think that they would want to know when is the new moon seen in the land of Israel because it affects all the tribes of Israel. Just like the barley is a valid witness anywhere in the land of Israel. If the barley is valid anywhere in the land of Israel, why wouldn't the new moon be valid anywhere in the land of Israel? If we're going to use equal weights and measures,
Right.
why would the barley be valid but the new moon not be valid? I don't.
I agree. I agree because there's some, you know, if I don't see it here, it is the most likely if it's going to be seen any place. It will either be down south, like Araba, close to, you know, that desert area, or it's going to be in Jerusalem because it's high.
Hmm.
Jerusalem, when you get outside of Jerusalem, especially in the area that Roy Hoffman lives, the
Hmm.
elevation, it really takes him above the clouds. And he will be able to see, you know, above that debris of the city, the
Small.
fog, yeah, all of that stuff. Even the low-lying clouds, if it's raining, he gets an above the cloud view, and many times
Hmm.
he'll see it when nobody else does.
Hmm. Okay, it's good to know. Okay, so what we're seeing is um, to us, Deuteronomy 16:9 and 10 says that you can't just cut the barley early and lay it aside, even though you don't eat of it, because we're told that the 7-week omer count begins at the time you put the sickle to the grain. So to us, that means that the wave sheaf should be the very first thing that is cut. And
Yes.
to us, that makes a lot of sense because when we're looking at patterns, type and shadow, so this other group that says, no, 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 you've got to have harvestable fields. They're saying first you collect the harvest, then you take a sheaf of that harvest and bring it to the priest. And to me,
Right.
that's not the same pattern as Yeshua. To us, the
It,
pattern of Yeshua is first you harvest a single omer, bring it to the priesthood, and then that clears the way. So Elohim sees that, and then he will sanctify and bless the rest of the harvest. So
yes.
that to us is the pattern that Yeshua did, because so Yeshua is, we're told in Corinthians that he is symbolic of the wave sheaf. He was obviously cut first and
Right.
sacrificed first, and then presented to Elohim first after he was ascended. And then we know that he was kept pristine because he told Miriam, "Don't touch me. I've not yet ascended to my Father. So I have not yet been presented to my Father." So again, like you mentioned, they're trying to keep the purity of that sheaf. And then
Right. I can't
afterward,
remember the
that's when the
reference.
harvest.
Hang on. There's a reference in the New Testament in Romans. It says, if the first fruits is holy, then the rest is holy. I can't, oh, what is the reference on
If the
that?
first fruits are, so are the branches of the, okay. And then,
No, this was the first fruits are
oh,
holy, the
okay.
rest is holy.
Romans 8, okay. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan
No.
within ourselves.
Let me see if I can find it for you. I know it's there.
Okay. We'll put it on pause for a second.
16.
Romans 11, 16.
Yes. It says the lump, talking about the wheat. If the first fruit be holy, the lump is also.
Yes.
Okay, so the first fruit, the point of that is the first fruit always comes before everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the lump is the dough offering. There's a dough offering that goes with the wheat. That talks about bringing your dough offering. But there's a first fruit. If the first fruit is holy, the rest is holy. So the principle of the first fruit sanctifying the rest of it is there in Romans 11. If the first fruit's not holy, then the rest is not holy.
Mm-hmm. So how does that help me make the connection that you're, or maybe we've made it already. So how did that?
So this verse is actually speaking of the olive first fruits. You know, we were talking about the 7 species of which the olives are the last.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He ties the first fruits and the lump, but then he also refers to the olive tree. Okay, because Romans is all about the olive tree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it just says if the first fruits is holy, the lump is holy. Okay, so what's the lump? The lump is the dough offering. Do you have that in? Can you pull that up in the King James with the Strongs or
Yes.
something?
Romans 11, 16. Okay, so
I think you're going to find that, if I remember right, it's been a long time. I believe that word for lump is dough, and that's speaking of the grain offering.
to mix a liquid with a solid sounds like dough. Mean to
Yeah.
knead a massive dough.
Okay, so we're talking specifically then about the grain offering. And this time, I believe that you'll find it's probably alluding to the wheat, because it's from the wheat we offer the dough offering. That's my understanding of it. Of the dough offering specifically is what I'm saying. So in order for the rest of it to be holy, the balance of it to be holy, the first fruits have to be holy.
Right.
And so if the first fruits of the wheat make the rest of it holy, then the first fruits of the barley would have to fall under that.
Right. Would make sense. Okay. Okay. So it says, so you shall count, Deuteronomy 16, verse 9 says, you shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. So that says to us, the wave sheaf is the very first thing that has to be cut. And then that's presented because it's symbolic of Yeshua. Then that clears the way for the rest of the harvest. And you were mentioning that there's a 7-week period of harvest generally. So obviously between Passover and the Feast of Weeks or Shavuot or Pentecost, there's these 7 weeks, and that's when the bulk of it. So you present the omer on the day of the wave sheaf offering. That clears the way for the 7 weeks of harvest, and then you can, and then that's when you'd bring up your first fruits, as you would bring them. You'd bring your offering, your first fruits and your tithes. You'd bring at the Feast of Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, okay. So that's very different than this other group that teaches harvestable fields, because they're teaching that you have to bring, and this is another thing we don't understand, they're teaching that you have to, these other groups are teaching that you have to, so all Israel's commanded to be, or at least the males are commanded to be in Jerusalem or wherever Yahweh chooses to place his name. They have to be there for the Passover, well, first of unleavened and seventh of unleavened. So they have to be there. Also Pentecost and the other pilgrimage feasts.
Right.
So we don't understand, if you have to be wherever your farm is, and then you have to come up to Jerusalem for Passover and the first of unleavened, and then let's come back to the diagram. This doesn't make any sense to us at all. So if you, let's say you have to be in Jerusalem for the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened, and then the wave sheaf is the first thing that can get cut. How do you be in Jerusalem for the feast and simultaneously go home, harvest your harvest, and then depending on the condition, you would have to sometimes dry it, and then you have to thresh it, and then you have to put it in sacks or whatever you would do. And if it's or you could give it to the Levites there, or you could hypothetically, if you're going to bring it up, I mean, it's just how can you simultaneously be in Jerusalem and be back home on the farm doing all that? That doesn't make any sense. Even if it's a week apart, how can you be here at the Passover and then the first day of unleavened is here, and then now you've got to go home, harvest your harvest, and then bring the sheaf or bring the first fruits offerings up at the day of the wave sheaf offering, and then the seventh of unleavened.
I know it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
You don't see that when you go to the book of Ruth.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't see them juggling that situation either.
Right. Good point. I want to write that one down. Give me just a second here. So, and then do you know, Ruth, do you know what
I think it's about chapter 2 is when the harvesting starts. Yes.
Yes. Let me write that one down. So Ruth 2.
And you have to realize in this story that everything that hit the ground that the reapers dropped, Ruth was picking up. So if the men are not home taking care of business as it's ripening, they can't go back and pick this stuff up off the ground. It belongs to the widows, the orphans, the homeless, the poor.
Yeah. Amen. It just doesn't work. This other theory, and that's what we're trying to bring out. That's what we're trying to help people understanding, is this other theory.
So this is the other theory that the other two groups have. And you and I have not talked about this.
Okay.
This is Bethlehem, Judea. The story of Ruth is Bethlehem, Judea.
Okay.
Bethlehem, Judea later began to be known by the name Migdal Eder, where the Tower of the Flock is.
Okay.
If you pull that up on Google Earth, you will see that it is very extremely rocky.
Oh, right. Yeah. Thank you.
And yet we have the story of Boaz's fields, both wheat and barley, being grown right there in that region. You have to turn it to the probably the satellite image will give you a good look at it.
Is this Nope. Let's show you location. Satellite. Okay, should I zoom in on it first? Okay, so
Yep.
Migdal Eder. Let's zoom in first, and then we'll switch to satellite. Oh, it's really choppy. Okay, so
You see how rocky that is in that area?
mm-hmm.
Very mountainous and very rocky. I was classically trained, and I'm going to use that for reference. I was classically trained that all the fields have to be flat. You can have a little elevation, but the mountains and the hillsides, they're for the goats. All of that is goat grass. And indeed, we know that the flocks for the temple were kept in this location. But if you look at the topography, you will see that it is very mountainous, and Boaz's fields were here. So that's one of the things that both of the other inspectors reject. And we talked a little bit too about where Joshua came into Israel.
Right.
His name is Aaron Lipkin. He's a tour guide. He's done some wonderful videos about this first place that they set the tabernacle up. And for them, that is an unacceptable area. Where Joshua chapter 5 happened was very unacceptable for the other two teams of inspectors that go out. But again, what I
Which
try
makes
to do,
which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because they're using Joshua 5:10-12 as one of their proof. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
okay.
they're using Joshua 5 verses 10-12 as one of their proof texts, but yet they're
Yes.
rejecting Jericho, where Joshua 5 happened, because it's too rocky. So how
Yes.
can you use it as a proof text on the one hand and then reject it on the other hand? That makes no sense. It does not compute. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yes, I agree. So these are all things that I see differently because of what we have recorded in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. So even though there was barley there, they
say that area is only for goat grass. That's only for where the flocks graze.
Okay. And this gets into what we were talking about before, is that there's going to be stumbling blocks to understanding. And so it's very, very difficult, because you've got, people, if they love the truth, it's sad, but they're going to have to study into the truth in order to obtain the truth. And
right.
it's hard. It's too bad. We're hoping to make it as easy as possible for people to get at the truth. We're trying to at least have a place where, if they read the study or watch the videos or whatever they do, that they can understand that this is what the truth is. But they're going to have to do that studying, and it really is too bad when people get frustrated and decide there's too many voices here. Yeah.
I have personally witnessed every year during what I call the annual Body Barley Wars. People throw their hands up.
Yeah.
And then they go back and they keep Hallel's calendar.
Right.
Because they understand that sometimes that zeal becomes vicious.
Right.
And they understand that it's not the way it should be.
Right.
And so they don't want any part of it.
Right. Well, there's definitely a sharpness of the word, and Yahweh's word is sharper than any two-edged sword, but that doesn't necessarily mean that relationships between believers should be sharp. I'm not saying there's not times for it, but there should be a love that's communicated there.
Absolutely.
Even when there's disagreement, there should still be a basic love that's the foundation of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's,
yeah.
I don't know what else to do except try to establish what's right. And if people get it, then they get it. And if they don't, then that's really too bad. But all we can really do is try to make it as easy as possible for people to understand. Um,
I agree. I agree. Yeah. So this just kind of goes back to why this time of year is so tough. I really do try to walk free of all tradition and just simply walk with the scriptures. And it's because of that that I began to read about all the places I could find grains in the Bible. And then I would say, well, let me go see what that area looks like. And I find that the scriptures reflect something completely different than the classical training.
So if we just drop this little viewer down here in Jericho area. So this is what Jericho. Why is that not acceptable for barley? Why can you not? Why can Yossi Cohen not fence that and grow barley?
Okay, right now it doesn't grow barley. That's for sure. But
well, okay. In ancient times, it was a lot wetter back in ancient
yes, it was. I agree. But when you go back up 90 toward Bet Shean, so you're all the way south. If you go back up
right.
90 towards Bet Shean, up in that area, they don't like. Let's see. Let's go to. Let me see if I can see. Whoops, we lost it.
What would you like?
Let me just look here a second. Do you see Gilgal? There will be a Gilgal on 90 someplace. It's a kibbutz or moshav. I'm not sure. Gilgal Junction will do just fine.
Gilgal Street or Gilgal Junction?
Gilgal Junction. Okay, now let's turn that into satellite.
Okay, just to help people orient. So here's Jericho, where we were. So we're further north, Gilgal Junction. We're going to turn, and then Jerusalem is to the west. Okay, so we're going to switch to satellite. You want me to zoom in, or
if you want? I mean, it'll be okay. So this is totally unacceptable. Because you can see, if you look between this dark line coming from north to south, this dark river, that's the Jordan River, and you can see large rocks in between Gilgal Junction and the Jordan River, right in that area, all those rocks. That's a very rocky area, and that classical training says, oh no, that's unacceptable, because those rocks are going to superheat the earth and cause that barley to mature sooner than any place else. It's going to cause a hothouse effect.
But if that's where the barley matures first, then what's wrong with that?
I'm telling you, classical training.
Okay.
Classical inspection.
You mean these other groups' classical inspection?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
I do agree. Barley planted by roadways, concrete asphalt roadways.
Sure.
I do agree. But when we're talking about the natural terrain of the land of Israel, I have to scratch my head.
Yeah, I don't. Let me, Becca. Let me unpack that a little bit for people that don't. I understand. I think I understand what you just said, but I think that might have gone past a few people. So
okay.
That seems very important. So some of these other groups, at least in my understanding, some of these other groups, they're saying that okay, so what we don't want, and correct me if any of this sounds wrong or mistaken. All right, so I'm just looking out the window here. The different plants will grow closer to a road because it's warmer. Basically, a road will, I don't know, it collects heat or traps heat or whatever, and there's other things, you end up with what they call a hothouse effect or a hot zone or this kind of a thing. Yes. So within a meter or a yard of a road, sometimes two maybe, the soil conditions are different because it's been packed and then or compressed by whatever means, and then asphalt gets hotter, So it's not fair to take a wave sheaf, to walk along the side of the road and pick this stalk of barley and that stalk of barley and the next stalk of barley until you get enough to make a sheaf. That's not
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that what we're looking for some field where in ancient times, back before there were paved roads, some field where Yossi Cohen would have put up his fence.
Mhm.
And back in ancient times, there was a lot more rain. There was a lot more moisture back then. He says that there will be again. But we're looking for some place that Yossi would have fenced it and would have grown his barley or his crops. But if there's naturally occurring, it just doesn't make any sense. If it's naturally warmer in that place and the barley would naturally come ripe sooner naturally, then are they objecting to that? Are they objecting because the
What
terrain?
they're objecting to is they feel like, well, again, number one, we know that they're looking for a more general ripening. Number one, and
Oh,
those
right. Okay.
places with the
Okay.
rocks,
hmm hmm
they're
Because they
right.
want to bring in harvestable fields, and so you're ending up with
Right,
these zones that are warmer, and they're saying
right,
those mess with their theory. That makes a lot of sense. That those
yeah,
zones mess with their theory that they're going to bring in the whole harvest, or at least the majority of it, and then bring a sheaf. They're saying that these outlier, these early ripening hot zone areas, those are messing with their theory because it requires them to harvest. It requires the farmers to harvest and set that aside, and that violates their misinterpretation of Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9 that's saying
right.
you can't start the count until, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And and let me say okay, so let's go back to the roads. They're
Mhm.
right. The barley is always out of the boot along the highway before it's out of the boot anyplace else. They're right.
Yeah, sure.
They're right. The rocks do mature the barley more quickly. Um, but God put the rocks there.
Yeah.
Hashem put the rocks there.
What's the problem with
Um,
that?
Last year, that was one of the things that I was called on the table for in the location where I said the barley was Aviv. Is that, oh, look at those green patches. Look how tall that is. There's got to be rocks down there. There's got to be rocks that cause that barley to excel.
So,
These are real things that was said to me.
I hope, I don't know if this will help you, but I hope this will help. Kind of one of the things that we're hoping to do is we are hoping to, at least long term, we are hoping to establish, what are the criteria so that we can get trained teams and so that we can at least develop a consensus. And this is the reason for the written studies, is that way those people, it's a minority of the people, but those people that do want to meticulously study out and say, okay, now why exactly are we doing this, that they can
Mhm.
verify. So that, because at this point in time, what some people see is, well, we have kind of a he said she said situation, or we have
Right.
four or more major barley observer teams. And so, okay, so irregardless of the personal attacks, and irregardless of the fact that some of them don't believe in Yeshua, and irregardless of all these other things, um, you know, people who really want to know, they're gonna want to study in and say, okay, um, you know what I mean? Yeah, they're gonna want to study in and say, okay, now why exactly is it?
Yeah.
Why are we listening to Becca and not these other
Do
witnesses?
you
I
know
guess
why
is.
I'm growing the wheat? Because it is in my heart every year to plant an acre of barley and an acre of wheat so that whoever wants to come and touch it, not to declare the first fruits from, but to have a location where people can come and have hands-on experience. Touch the barley, open the barley, roast the barley. Same with the wheat.
That would be great.
Have wheat for Shavuot. That's what's in my heart. That's why I'm multiplying this barley and this wheat. But the barley is easy. I'm not really multiplying the barley. I'm thinking, I don't know. Haven't really talked about it. It's something that's still rolling around in my head. I'm thinking about going after just that red barley. Yeah, anyway, that's just a thought. But definitely having an acre of the wild heirloom barley and the wild heirloom black wheat, where people can come and this is what it is, and this is, when are you here? Are you here when it's blooming? This is what it looks like it's when it's blooming. Are you here at harvest? Let's roast this barley and let's thresh it out, and experience, touch it, learn it, know it.
I would love to do that. I don't know how I could do that, but that would be great. I would love to do that.
Because it doesn't belong just to me, it belongs to the body.
What would an acre, does an acre represent something special, or is it just you're talking about something that's big enough that it's obviously not a hot zone, but it's actually a big enough,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
total sense what you're saying about their complaint about the hot zones, because it messes up their interpretation or their misinterpretation of Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9. That makes, we were talking before about you were telling me before that the oats, the wild oats and the barley and the wheat, they all come out, or they all sprout about the same time. And
Yeah.
then the barley matures faster. Okay.
I told my husband the other day, you're going to laugh. I said, I don't know of another person in the world that God could send to Israel and she'll go out and dig up the grains to find out what's germinating.
Yeah.
This year, as soon as the little stems broke through the soil, and I could tell it was cereal grass coming up. One of the classical trainings I had was that the barley comes up first, followed by the wheat, the oats come up first, followed by the barley, and then by the wheat. And I would look at the earth here years on end, and when the cereal grasses would come up, they first come up, it looks like we have a yard. I mean, it looks like you could go mow the grass. That's the appearance of a new seeded yard is what it looks like. And I would notice that, the oats would come out of the head and there would still be tall grass standing there with nothing out of the head. So I had always questioned if that was right. And this year I had just determined ahead of time that as soon as anything breaks the earth, I was going to go out there and start digging stuff up. And I did. And actually what does happen is that the oats, the barley, and the wheat all germinate and break the surface of the earth at the same time. Barley is ready before the wheat, but oats have the quickest growth cycle. The oats will be dropped and they're getting ready, they're starting to drop. The oats will be dropped actually dropping. And so classically trained barley wants the oats completely dropped. They want the heads of oats white so that there are no grains left in them. And then they know that the classically indivisible grain of barley is ready. Okay. In my world, they're yellowing and they're beginning to drop. And that's exactly what they're doing right now. They're yellowing and they're beginning to drop. So the barley is ready first. It has the shortest reproduction cycle. I'm sorry, I said barley. I'm getting a little fatigued. The oats are up first. They have the shortest reproduction cycle. Then the barley that came up at the same time is ready after that. Then the wheat that came up at the same time is ready after that.
Right. And you were saying that some of these teams have gone out there with their delayed calendars, and they've gone out there looking for the wheat, and the wheat is already dropped.
No, what I said actually was that when I determine the barley, the wheat is ready for Shavuot, and their month later calendar I can look at the land and all the wheat is shattered. There's no wheat left standing in the field.
I almost caught that. Could you try it one more time?
Okay. What I'm saying is when I've determined the barley and I've started our calendar and whoever does it when I do it, when we have our calendar and we determine the wave sheaf.
Mm-hmm.
1 month later, the barley is ready for Shavuot out for the calendar that I determine. Okay, the wild barley will be ready for Shavuot. 1 month later on their calendar, there's nothing left on the land that looks like barley because it's already dropped.
This is our point with, okay, so that's what, I realize this is one of the things that I wrote in my letter to these other groups. I'm trying to communicate with these other groups and trying to help them, ask them questions. Hey, what about this? What about that? How do you explain this? How do you explain that? And I never get a response. You're saying I'll probably never get a response. But so that's what, that's one of the things I'm asking them is like, okay, wait a minute. So you've got, all right, this would be good. So if you're getting fatigued, then I want to kind of, let's get to the main thing here. But so I'm going to jump ahead. Okay, so I wonder if I can pull that up.
I'm laughing already.
What?
I saw your barley growth chart.
Yeah. Well, why does that make you laugh? I said, this is what I don't understand. That you've got 30 from the time the barley head emerges from the boot or from the stalk, you've got 31 days to go.
Don't. No, let me please, brother, let me tell you. Year before last, let's see, year before last, the first year I inspected by myself when Elohim rocked my world and made me think about Yossi in the field. The barley in the north, I know when those little grass, when that grass broke the surface of the earth, I know when it did. Okay. It was 4.5 months because of the rain and our weather before that barley approached being ready here in the north. 4.5 months from the time it broke the earth until the time they mowed it down here in the village, because part of what they do before their Pesach is, I don't know how it came to be, but I feel like they're actually even cleaning the vacant areas. You clean for Pesach, so they clean the vacant areas in the village. They take the tractors and they mow all the standing stuff down. Okay, 30 days we had already had the omer declared in the south. It was just barely reaching the dough stage in the north when they cut it down. It had been up out of the earth 45 days.
It had been up out of the earth 45 days.
Yes.
And it was dough stage.
It was dough stage. That was the year we had all that rain, that first year when everything was oats and we couldn't hardly find any barley, which was, now this is 3 seasons. This is a season, so it was 3 seasons ago. And it was 45 days. That's why I laugh at the charts. I've seen the barley do crazy things.
Okay, but all right. So can I run with this? So I want to use 2, because I think this is important. And this is, if you're getting fatigued, then I think we should focus on the most important stuff.
Well, I just might say barley and what I mean wheat and vice versa. Just correct me.
Okay. Well, here's the other chart that I want to refer to. Okay, so we're gonna let me see if we can do this. So and you helped me with this a lot. So this is from the University of Wisconsin, I believe it's Wisconsin, and this is like in a normal, an alleged quote unquote normal average spring barley development cycle in Wisconsin. So
of domestic barley.
Wisconsin.
Of domestic barley. Let's make that clear.
Right. Okay, so domestic barley, and the barley you're growing is this heirloom barley, what I've been calling the Raim barley, but
Yeah,
this wild antique heirloom barley that you found.
that dances to the song of Elohim.
Okay, that dances to the song of Elohim, the dancing barley. So okay, so we're comparing we're comparing barley to barley, I guess. So it's
We
not
are.
exactly the same thing, but at least for this domestic, here's my, how can I summarize this briefly? So the problem that I have is that I suppose for the people watching, I should at least explain it once through, and then we can. So at least for the University of Wisconsin, with their domesticated barley in an alleged hypothetical standard quote unquote normal spring,
Mhm.
it takes basically when the barley emerges from the soil. Okay, so the barley emerges at day 10, and then it comes to maturity on day 89. And this is what we would call modern combine ripe. So, in other words,
Yes.
it's a brittle kind of a barley, because when the combine comes by, it's going to slap the barley with this paddle wheel, and it's going to shatter the head, and at least some partial separation of the grains and the chaff is going to occur. So it's got a bunch of things going on. It's a combined operation. That's why they call it a combine.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is, okay, so then you have this other chart that talks about from anther opening and fertilization. And then so you've also got, so they're talking, so to me, I think, at least in this hypothetical standard chart, so you've got the head emergence and fertilization would take place. So you got this 31 days here. Let me see if I can scoogee that. So you've got this 31 days here, and then you've got this 31 days here. Uh, I don't know if it's exactly the same 31 days, but it looks very similar to the same 31 days. What the problem I have with their other theory, so what you're suggesting is that medium dough in an average hypothetical year, which doesn't exist because every year is different, every location is different, all barley is different. But so medium dough would take place about here. By the
Mhm.
time you get to the hard dough stage in this alleged hypothetical 21 days, and then an ancient sickle ripe would be hypothetically around, who knows, 27, 28 days, because you can't, with an ancient sickle, they weren't these super sharp stainless steel sickles back then. You had
Right.
flint and animal bones and all kinds of
Yes.
stuff going on. So you couldn't you couldn't let the barley get this mature, or else when you tried to gather the stalks, some grain is going to fall. When you're hacking away on the stalks with this animal bone or with this flint sickle, it's going to shake the stalks, and a lot more of the grain is going to fall.
Yeah.
So you had to harvest it at least a few days early. Well, we don't know how many, and the barley farmers, they're so familiar with their crops, they're probably not counting the days, they're eyeballing the thing. They're just taking a
Right.
look like farmers do today. They take a look, it's
Right.
like, yep, seems like it's
Yeah.
time to harvest starting tomorrow or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but what I don't understand is these other groups, if you could comment on their definition of Aviv. And let me tell you why, is because, like, from what I understand, what they're saying is Aviv, they want very low. So some of these groups, they commented on your Aviv barley, and they said, no, 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 no. Your medium dough barley was way too wet. They said to have Aviv barley. To me, what they're describing is very hard dough barley, either hard dough or very hard dough barley. And what I'm
What they
saying
want
is
is it to be
that
indivisible by the fingernail.
indivisible. So in your experience, in your limited experience, because you say you're not an expert, when you say indivisible by the fingernail, what stage are we talking? We're talking hard dough, very hard dough.
For me, it's out of dough because you can't divide it by the fingernail. When you think of a dough, there's moisture in it. You can uh, at least divide it depending on how stiff the dough is. I'm talking just now as a bread maker, and I think that that's why I'm so comfortable with the term dough. You can at least divide it in two, but theirs it's really a leathery stage. You can no longer divide it. You might be able to dent it. Denting it is acceptable, but cutting it in two with your fingernail is not acceptable.
So what, if I could, I'm trying to go somewhere with this. You probably know that already. So what stage is what you just described?
I'm so thankful to Abba. I never learned these modern
Okay. Okay.
terminologies. I don't know.
Okay.
I know I've heard them, but my eyes always just kind of rolled back in my head every time I started listening to
Okay.
the technical
Okay.
speak. And
To
it's
me,
just,
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
connect to it.
Okay. Okay. I guess what my concern is, and maybe I'll just, if you just let me lay out my concern, and maybe you could comment on it. To me, what it sounds like, what these other groups are describing, is barley that is almost already ripe. So in this alleged
Have you seen the
hypothetical,
shoes from my first year? I did the inspection
I'm sorry.
when I was sent into a field to learn long distance about the barley. And when I got there and I was on WhatsApp on my smartphone and on the camera, and I was being coached on what to do. There was this voice of just like, oh, that field wasn't even in the running. They had proclaimed the new year in the South. But when they had been, this was in the north, by the checkpoint as you go towards the West Bank on Highway 90, there's a checkpoint there,
Sure.
right? I'm sure you're familiar with it. And that field's right there. So they said, oh, that field wasn't even in the running. And so I went back and rechecked it just a couple of days before wave sheaf. And they said, yes, that's Aviv. Well, what happened when I walked through the field is I had tennis shoes on. Barley has, if you've ever been around barley and wheat, they have barbs up and down the outer casing of the body. And they have the long awns. It's kind of
Stick
like
to your
an
shoes
arrow.
and your socks. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they only travel one way. They go in. And once they go in, the barbs, you can't pull them out. When I walked out of that field, I had so much barley in my shoes. It literally, and I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. I worked on them for a long time and I put them up and I finished them the next year, cleaning the barley out of them. Because it was at that point that it was literally walking through that barley field, they were shattering and the barley was being driven into my shoes
And at what
by me
state?
walking through
Sorry,
they said it was Aviv.
they said it was Aviv. So
Yeah,
this is my point. This what I'm trying to say is and let me know if you agree with this or not. But what they're calling Aviv, to me, that's just like,
it's too far for me.
it's way too far. It's
We're going to Jerusalem
it's
with this. How's
shattering.
it going to make it that far?
You can't even harvest it because you're going to bundle it and whack it with your ancient
If I
sickle, and
can't walk
you're going
through
to
it, what's
lose.
the sickle going to do?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's what I needed to know. I mean, yeah, it's just.
I know I've got that picture in my group.
And then
I'll send it to you.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'll send that picture to you so you can see it.
Okay, okay,
That was a big
okay.
deal. I mean, that was their proof because I think that was a run-in with the other group that year a little bit on I think that was the year that the other group come up with the second video where he was saying, whatever, they had delayed a month. And so it was a big deal for the whole world that I had barley on my feet and that it had reached that level of maturity just before wave sheaf day.
Yeah, I don't. To me, okay. So what makes sense to me, what you're saying is that this is because of their interpretation of Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9, that they want to bring in the mass of the harvest. So they're waiting for the barley to be ripe So that's why they're artificially, to me, Aviv is something that's still soft and green and immature. And they're saying that Aviv is something, they will say that it's soft and green and immature, but like what you're saying, they're defining
It's
when you,
tan by then.
it's
It's not
tan,
green.
it's
The
brittle.
grain is tan.
Yeah.
The grain is
So,
longer. Okay, so if we go back again to the scripture, okay, and we see all the things that all the references to Yeshua. He was the Lamb of God. He's the tender shoot that springs up. There's nothing about his personification that says that he was nearing the end of his life.
right. Pardon me, I'm going to take some notes here.
That's okay.
So we've got Aviv, Yeshua. He was the tender shoot that springs up.
Yeah, and he was a lamb. A lamb is less than 12 months old. It's tender, it's youthful, it's fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Well, thank you. I mean, that answers my question, because it's just to me, these other groups, they're just their barley is way too brown to be green. It's way too mature to be Aviv. And we just tend to see Aviv barley as being something that is still immature, and it's necessary. So Elohim specifies that he wants, if you bring him a wave sheaf off, if you bring a sheaf of your first fruits, it must be either Aviv or Carmel, and then they translate that as you have to pound it from the husk. But in any event, it's not. Well, I think you have a different definition. But in any case, Aviv, it's still green, so it's medium dough. And they're saying there was a recent publication. They said that your medium dough doesn't qualify as Aviv because it has too much moisture in it.
It's too immature.
It's
Too immature.
supposed to be immature. That's the point.
By the
That's what
way,
the
you
word Aviv
can't
means:
pound the
green,
barley from
immature.
the husk. That's another thing that needs to be addressed. You cannot pound the barley from the husk.
Not even in a mortar and pestle situation.
Then you're grinding the barley, you're not pounding it.
Oh, okay.
If you're talking about winnowing barley, my experience has been with the barley, because I have looked at all this stuff. You're going to laugh. The first year that we had a house in Israel, when we weren't in an apartment, I went out and I picked a bunch of wild barley, because I was going to have me one unleavened barley cake on the week of unleavened from the wild barley in Israel. I worked for 4 hours for 3 days cleaning that barley to get one little scrawny barley cake out of it. The more that barley matures, the harder that husk wraps around that grain. It doesn't let go. You can't just beat it off. It's hard even to peel off. It really almost has to be parched off. I know that they talk about the disciples and the Messiah rubbing the grains between their hands.
Yes.
I've never found that stage, ever, 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 ever. I'm not saying they didn't. The Bible obviously says they did. What I'm saying is, I'm wondering if they weren't just rubbing the awns off and chewing the barley in the husk. Because I know what the barley does. I've been chasing that scripture I just told you about, rubbing it in your hands, ever since I've been in Israel. I can't make it do it. So we're missing a piece of information.
Okay. But in any event, the barley needs to be green and immature to qualify as Aviv, and not yellow and brittle and
That's right.
digging its way into your shoes.
That's right. And I'll send you that picture from that year.
Okay.
I believe it's even got the announcement calling it Aviv if I remember right.
Okay. I'm trying to remember. So I've never actually been to the checkpoint that you mentioned, but I have grown barley a few times just to grow it, just to see what it's like. And I'm not sure, but I know that I did peel the husk at one point to get to the barley. So I don't know if that's a different type of barley, or I'm not. I can't speak to that.
I can peel this to get to the husk, but you've got to bend the on backwards, and then the front of the husk cover presents itself to you, and you can get a hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if somebody knows how to get the husk off this, I would love to. When I
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem eating, just eating the husk. I mean, it is edible. It's not.
except for you don't want to do the on because it has those barbs.
Right.
Remember?
Right. No, you
Those
want to take the
barbs are
awns off.
horrendous.
Right.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, the awns, those are the hairs that you hand on the. Let me just show
The
it.
sticks.
Yeah. Let me. So barley. What do we got? Different kinds of barley. We just picked this one because it's handy. So the awns, those are the hairs that are like that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Now, my research on the barley, the way they processed it, is they had what is called a sledge, and that was just flat boards with, if you think of the sickle with the animal bones and stones, it was a flat board that had those pieces of rocks embedded, and they would use the animal to drag that over the top of the barley, going in circles, and the wheat to bust it loose.
Let me see if I've got that handy. Not this one. You're talking about the
No,
other
no,
one.
no, no. Let me see if I can find it for you real quick. Well, I won't be able to share it.
So sickle.
No, you're looking for I think it's called a sledge.
This one?
Look for threshing cart. Look for threshing cart.
Oh, this is my I don't know. If did you send me a threshing cart? I'm just looking in my photos.
I may not have. I may not have. That might have been something I
Yeah.
didn't do.
It's okay. So threshing cart. So ancient threshing cart images.
Okay, any of those down there on those images will do. So right, see the the one over here on the left, second row down.
This.
Okay, yeah, that's a little bit more. Oh, wait a minute. Here's the threshing board right here in the center. Go back over there. Sorry. And oh, where'd it go? It's gone. Here. Yes, that's it right there.
Right there.
That's right there. And so they put stones in there, and then somebody sat on top of that, and the ox or the horse or whatever they were using was pulled over the top of those grains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And did how did it?
I would assume that would take the husk off.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I've never tried it, but I would assume that that's sufficient to get the husk off.
It's going to abrade the husk off. It's
Yes.
gonna catch it in those slots and that kind of thing. It's gonna turn it and roll it and abrade it off.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to break some of the grains, but you're going to just thresh out the chaff and keep the grains.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
My critical letters said that, they understood you have to roll it between your hands. I'm saying, I've never seen that. Come show me how and I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you can't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I guess my point in all that was kind of my point in all that was that when they're saying that you have to have harvestable fields before you can declare them, well, how can I put that? Yeah, they're saying that you have to have, and there's, I guess we can let that go. They're saying that you have to have harvestable fields before you can. Now, how do we get that back? There we go. Okay, good. They're saying that you have to have harvestable fields before they will even declare the moon of the Aviv, or at the minimum. So my point was, okay, now let's, so the moon only comes around every 29 or 30 days.
Right.
So let's suppose that the barley comes Aviv. Let's say it's 4 months, or excuse me, it's 4 days after the new moon is seen. So just to take any 3-day pre-cut out of the equation. So let's just say that the barley comes Aviv 4 days after the new moon is seen. Okay, now you have to wait an additional 25 or 26 days to get to the next new moon. And then you have to wait an additional 15 to 21 days to get to the next wave sheaf offering. So how are you going to get barley that's ripe to stay in the head for an additional 40 to 47 days
You're not.
when it's already so fragile that it's already breaking?
Yeah, you're not. You're not. You're not. And honestly, in some cases, I don't even think that's the point, because I want to go back again and make reference to what was written recently about how that the barley that I parched was not, or I roasted, was not freshly cut, and yet their premise is you lay it aside, and yet the criticism was that mine
Yeah,
wasn't fresh.
yeah. No, they're not theologically consistent, at least not from
No,
what
they're
I can tell.
they're
So
not. They're not.
I don't mean, yeah, I just, anyway, I
Yeah.
guess for the people who are watching and they're wanting to know, why are we using Becca Biderman for witness? I mean, it just, from everything I see, yours is the witness that lines up, and they're suggesting all these other things that I can't find anywhere in Scripture. They've got Father's field. They're defining Aviv as something that's so brittle it's already halfway falling out of the head, instead of being green. They're saying, no, if you need to harvest the barley early, just go ahead and harvest it, and the wave sheaf, or the omer count, doesn't begin. And and then they don't talk to us. So
Yeah.
it's like, what, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 No, I understand. Yeah. I don't know if I should tell you this part, but I'm going to. When I came to Israel, I had not been that long out of Sunday church. And that part just didn't work for me. There was nothing, because it was mainline Christianity. It just was like, it was like faith without the substance. Okay. So when I came to Israel, I had rather laid aside the Jesus Christ of the Sunday church. I still believed that, Yeshua was the Son of God, but I didn't know what to do with him, because all I knew was what I had been taught. And at that time, my heart was just like, which actually was a good thing. It actually brought me in the right direction, because, I grew up, you pray to Jesus. I wouldn't pray to him anymore. I only prayed to the Father. I now know we pray in the name of
sorry,
Yeshua,
I
but we
didn't.
pray to the Father.
Right.
Okay, but
Ah.
But I was praying to Jesus. And so I had quit
Mm.
that. I didn't know what to do with that man I grew up knowing in the church. I
Uh-huh.
came to Israel questioning everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I hit the barley and I hit the land of Israel, the Father started, even the verses that I had learned in Sunday church, he started connecting the dots for me and weaving them together. And my faith in the Messiah now is stronger than it's ever been because of touching the land and touching Torah and understanding. You see how the parables for me connect to the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
I see the parables in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have is before you is somebody who's on a quest and on a journey, like so many people are in the world. That I've said, I don't care what it takes. The price is not too high. I just want your truth. And so I want to guard that. I don't ever want to lose that. I think the minute that I become mundane, that growth stops. And I don't ever want to be mundane about what I've learned. You know, we talk about your charts and we talk about, when I walk into a field, I walk in with new eyes because every season it's different. This year it's so different. There's no hot winds. But guess what? I didn't tell you this. The hot winds are coming on Thursday. They're saying we're going to have May temperatures with hot easterly winds.
Oh,
Isn't that
okay.
interesting? Isn't that
Yeah, it is.
interesting timing? You know, so I walk into the field with new eyes every time I go in because I've seen 45-day barley, because I've seen when that barley came up out here from Raim, it was so hot, it started blooming the next day when it came out of the boot. It bloomed that quick. It doesn't always do that. You have to watch. The Father wants our attention. He wants to know if we're watching and waiting for what he's going to perform for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Mm-hmm.
Gospels all over. Watch and wait. You don't know the day or the hour. Watch. Are you ready? Are you prepared? Have you got your candles? You got your lamps filled or your wicks trimmed? He wants our full attention. Sorry, I got
No, I'm into that.
a little carried away there.
No, that's fine. That's just fine.
So
In this,
it's the
as a
barley. Go ahead.
no, I mean, I think that's the attitude that we're supposed to have. Is we're supposed to be paying attention, complete attention to him, and we're supposed to be, uh, yeah, and you know, not following a rabbinical calendar, certainly, and not placing any requirements that Yahweh himself doesn't place, that we're supposed to keep an open mind and an open heart, and we're supposed to be willing to change if circumstances dictate. I know it was a big shock for me when I was trying to pay attention to these other groups, because I had been taught that this was the ancient method and was the way it was done, and then started having questions and
Without answers,
without
without
answers.
responses. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I do love it. I mean, I will be very honest. It is literally like watching God, because he's the one who causes this stuff. And so when the barley comes up, and my full attention's on it because I get to watch what God's going to do. What's he going to do this year? What's it going to look like? How's he going to present it? Where's it going to be? You know, it's thrilling to see it every year.
Amen. Would it be great when we all get to be there?
Yes.
And watch it grow. I appreciate you helping us with the information and knowledge that he's giving you, and I appreciate you talking with us and helping us to learn and grow and refine our understanding. hopefully we can get more people. Hopefully he will help us get more people on the same page who understand that it's medium dough and that it's the earliest sheaf. You don't have to wait for everything to come ripe first, because that doesn't fit the pattern.
Right.
Check my notes. Just oh yeah, I think we covered everything. The only thing was I think there's also this concept we've gotten out there. I know there's some teachers who talk about the spring feasts and the fall feasts, and I used to do that, and I've stopped. What's that?
Yeah. I don't like those terms.
Yeah, I've stopped using those terms. Not very long ago, but once I realized the significance, it was like, oh wow, we need to stop with that, because I think when people say spring feasts and fall feasts, that means that we're paying attention to the season as opposed to the agriculture. And I realized that the agriculture is dependent on the season.
Right.
But so it says Genesis 1:14. Well, I might as well pull it up. So Genesis 1:14. Let's find it. So it says, then Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs. In English, it says for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years. But in Hebrew, it says, let them be for signs and for moedim,
yes,
meaning the festivals, the feasts,
yes,
and for days. So I think what happens is that you end up with people that they say, no, see there, we have to wait until it's spring. We have to wait for the spring season to come around. And if it's not spring, because I've seen some other disparaging comments about your work where people says, we're still in winter. We haven't even got to spring yet. And it's like, where is that coming from? I mean, to me, it sounds like a real similarity to the equinox theorists. And to me, the equinox again is adding, because it doesn't say the equinox anywhere. And I realize all the theories about Tekufa, but it was never used. It's used, the word Tekufa is used to mean equinox in modern Hebrew, but in ancient Hebrew, it just refers to a cycle. Never was. Yes. So I think this way you end up people saying, well, we can't use your witness because it's still winter. And I just don't. Is there anything to add to that? Or
yeah, and so that's that other side of the family tree, that one who classically trains. That's exactly what's going on. And actually, I guess both sides. Actually, even the independent inspector, the one who's independent now.
I don't.
Okay. Even last year, they were saying, it's still raining. How can the barley be ready? It's still winter. Ha, 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 ha.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, they're saying it can't be Pesach yet because it's still cold.
Right. Okay, so let's just talk about that. I think it is. Try Luke 35. I'm remembering Luke 35. That may not be it. No,
that's not it.
Try Mark 35.
That's not it.
Okay, so just put in Peter warmed himself by the fire.
By the fire. Or just
put by the fire. Yeah.
Didn't like that.
No.
By the fire. Luke.
Okay. Yeah, let's just go with Luke 22. Okay. So on Friday morning when I was roasting the barley, it was raining, and I had on double thick pants. It had like a lining and an outer lining. I had on a flannel, a insulated shirt. I had on a shirt under that, and I had on a wool cap. In Israel, if it is raining, if it's going to rain, if it has rained, it is cold, period, end of story. It was in the 50s that day. Today, it's not raining. It was 75.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In Israel, if it is going to rain or raining, it is cold. Now, we find when Yeshua is in the temple, and this is in 3 of the Gospels, Luke is not the only place, we find that when Yeshua is being examined by the high priest, that Peter is warming himself by the fire on Passover.
So John 18, verse 18, now the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. So they're saying we can't have Passover when it's still cold because it's not
Yes.
spring.
Yes, and that Elohim would not do that to his people to make them walk in mud or walk in rain to
Right.
observe the feast.
But it doesn't match.
It doesn't match.
It doesn't match scripture. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No. If it's supposed to rain on Thursday, and they're saying it's a really big deal because we're actually going to get quote unquote a warm rain. Well, we'll see what that means, but it's definitely going to be colder than it is today. Today it's 75. Friday it was 50. Yeah, 64. That's pretty warm for a rain. Very warm for a rain. For in Israel, it usually drops into the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and if it was night, would have been in
Then
the
it's
50s.
going to be even colder.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I appreciate you talking with us. I appreciate you taking the time to help us understand things. I guess it's very helpful to be able to talk with you and to help people understand why it is that we're choosing to use your witness in the land as opposed to some of these other groups. Because I just, I'm just trying to study the scriptures for myself. I'm trying to make sure I get it right. My own personal understanding is that there is a national call that we do need to be organized as a nation. So I'm, and those of us, the rest of us who are working with me, Oscar, Moises, the others. So we're trying to make sure that we get it right, so that when we declare something, this is what we believe. We're trying to make sure that we get it right, at least to the best of our knowledge and ability. And if we learn something new, we're going to make a change to the study and we're going to republish or whatever we need to do. And I just think it's important that people know, right now we're in it's a difficult situation. We've basically got one witness to the barley, which is you. And we appreciate very much the videos and the photos and the ability to ask you questions, and you talk with us and you explain things, and we don't get that.
Yeah. No, I know it's hard when you don't get answers. Uh-oh, did I lose you?
For many of the other groups, only other groups your screen is frozen. Oh,
okay.
I'm not sure. Now. Something with the connection. Okay.
Yeah, you froze for a while, but it's back now.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I see, and that's maybe that sets me apart from everybody else. Is anybody who asks me respectful questions deserves an answer, because this stuff doesn't belong to me. I have never seen the barley as mine or my work or it is my work and my responsibility, but with a little me and a big Yah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want my goal. I look forward to when the body of Messiah is on the same calendar.
Amen.
I would actually love to have somebody else in Israel that was as passionate about it as I am, a buddy for the field that we could, iron sharpens iron, another set of eyes that sees differently than I see and might notice something that I don't notice.
Well, I hope that hope that somebody will know about your guest house, and that somebody who has the time and the ability to go to Israel and learn from you, I would, if they were to ask me, I would encourage them to go and learn from you. So,
Right. Yeah, I'm very open to that. And that statement is very true, but it's also as opposed to the other sides who try to keep things so sewed up.
right. This is the Father's field, and we are the ones that get to determine where this field is and which field it is, and we are the only ones who get to
Or
declare it.
sadder, the Father has given us this patterns for umpteen years. Why would he change those now? That's even that was heartbreaking. That crushed my heart, not because it was pointed at me, but because it says we're in a rut. God can't do anything new. God can't,
Hmm.
we can't learn anything fresh.
They think they're already there.
I know, it broke my heart for them.
Yeah,
Made me very,
that's
very
too
sad.
bad. That's too bad. Well, is there anything more? You've
No.
helped us for this has been great. This has really been great. I think we covered all my questions. So
Okay,
uh, yeah, um, and if we have more questions, we can just maybe we can Zoom again.
sure,
Call you again.
sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Close in prayer.
Sure.
Father Yahweh, we just thank you so much for this time. Thank you for Becca's witness and her testimony, and for explaining to us the things that she knows and the things that she's seen. And Father, I ask that you please would use her according to your perfect will to help build your son's kingdom as you will. Father, please bless her and her family and provide for them. Things are difficult for them right now. And Father, if there's anyone that wants to go to the land of Israel and learn about the barley from her, I just ask that you please help them to know about her guest house, and that she wants to help train other witnesses and share and show them, train them in the things that she has learned from you. And Father, please just lead us and guide us. Please help us to be good witnesses for you and for your son. And please help this message go forth. And please help us to build your son, his true kingdom according to his word, the way you want things to be done. We ask these things in your son Yeshua's name, so that we might be better servants for him. Yeshua, our Messiah and King. Amen.
Amen.